Good evening, families, and welcome to the Parent and Family Programs webinar series. I'm very excited about the discussion that we're going to have this evening with some rock star panelists, if I do say so myself. So thank you for spending the evening with us. So the purpose of our panel discussion this evening is to talk about fostering connection amid pandemic. We've brought together some experts in involvement at William & Mary, and we'll have a guided discussion during which we'll address ways that, COVID-19 has created obstacles for their work, how they're supporting students in fostering connection, and what are the ways that students are creating their own community here at William & Mary. And so before we get started, just a reminder, you can ask us questions in the chat. Be sure to send to all panelists and all attendees so that everyone can see your questions. You can also submit questions in Q&A. I do have a pre-slated list of questions that I'm going to ask our panelists this evening, and we'll get to some of your questions as we have time. I did ask if you had any questions for our panelists, and I've incorporated those questions as I've been able to. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. So who would like to kick us off?
I'll start us off, Heather. Hi, my name is Trici Fredrick. I work in student unions and engagement, and we have oversight for a lot of our physical spaces on campus. So the student union, Sadler Center, which is pictured behind me, actually, and then a lot of the other spaces, outdoor spaces, we have oversight for events that might happen in those spaces, as well as other activities. We also provide event support and execution for our students and the student groups within our area. So we also work very closely with Alma Mater Productions, AMP for short, and they provide a lot of the activity happening outside the classroom, which, as we know, has been both virtual and in person this year.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us this evening, Trici. Lauren, you want to go next?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lauren Garrett. I'm the Director of Student Transition Engagement Programs. And for those that have been following along, yes, our office name has changed. We were formerly known as First Year Experience. So as you can surmise, we are the office that's responsible for the onboarding and introduction of new students to the William & Mary community, which we all know struggled a little bit this past fall semester, especially with everything that's been happening in terms of the pandemic. With the expansion, it means that we are going to be sticking alongside your students during their journey, not only into William & Mary, but through, and helping them also think about who and what they want to be upon graduation. So helping them in, through, and out of their William & Mary experience. Glad to be with y'all tonight.
Thank you, Lauren. And finally, we have Jennifer.
Thanks, Heather. My name is Jennifer Leung, and I am the Associate Director for the Office of Student Leadership Development. Our office provides support to the nearly 500 recognized student organizations on campus. And that includes our fraternities and our sororities, our media and publication organizations, and our student government. And I also have primary oversight over our online student engagement platform called TribeLink, which we will probably talk about frequently during our time together. Happy to be with you tonight.
Fantastic. As you can see, I brought some true experts in involvement at William & Mary, and I'm thrilled about the conversation that we're going to have. And so like I mentioned at the top of our program, I have a list of questions that we'll run through, and then as time allows, we will take some of your live questions. So first, I want to get us started with just laying some groundwork about engagement and involvement at William & Mary. What is William & Mary's Student Affairs approach to student engagement and involvement? And Lauren, if you want to kick us off with that one.
Absolutely. So I don't think it would surprise anyone when we talk about the fact that students that come to William & Mary want to be involved. They've had experiences in their previous academic and co-curricular lives, being the leaders, being in front of groups, working on projects, really being overall stellar student and community leaders. And when they come to William & Mary, they want to do the same thing. And we want those experiences for them as well. So our approach to student involvement and engagement starts from day one as they're thinking about joining the William & Mary community, even during the undergraduate admission process. We're talking to students about being intentional with the choices they make and hoping that they're thinking a little bit reflectively about where they want to make impact and how they want to spend their time. So over the course of even the months preceding their campus arrival, we have them log into TribeLink, which Jen will talk a little bit more about, I'm sure, and have them start exploring all of those different clubs and orgs that they can get involved in. And I think it's important here to make mention of the fact that involvement and engagement can be two very different scenarios. Involvement tends to be a little bit more shallow, a little bit more, maybe I'm a member, I pop in, I pop out, I attend this event or this program, and I'm glad to be here, but it's not necessarily how I define myself. Engagement might be a little bit more in depth, thinking about, I like this topic. I find value in spending my time here, talking about these topics, being with these people. And I really want to dig deep and see how this might be part of my passion and purpose moving forward. And so we start talking about intentionality and encourage students even from their first year on to think strategically about where they want to spend their time. And some of this goes back to that idea of well-being and harmony. And so we want students to make sure that they're not over inundating themselves with co-curricular and extracurricular activities, but instead finding ways to think about how they can support both in and outside of the classroom learning in very meaningful and tangible ways, however that speaks to them. Clubs and organizations, research, study abroad, so on and so forth. We talk about all of these opportunities and experiences that are available to students, and that's really what we're hoping students will glean from their time with us, is being really strategic about who they spend time with and where they spend their time getting engaged in projects around campus. Jen and Trici have major oversight. This is where I'm going to fangirl a little bit, but they have major oversight for big programs of involvement and engagement on our campus community. And I think they're going to share a little bit more about what they do to get students engaged. But it's really about encouraging students to see potential in themselves, trying new things, and not being afraid to even outreach and ask for folks to sort of include them in things. And we know that can always be difficult for our students.
That's fantastic, Lauren. I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention that sometimes that first kickstart into involvement at William & Mary occurs during orientation, as that is their first experiencing and exploring what involvement and engagement can look like as a student at William & Mary. My next question would be, how have we shifted the ways that students can learn about joining opportunities and ways to join some of these organizations and activities?
Well, Heather, I think I'll start by saying, I don't know that we're really shifting or using new technologies and platforms. I think we're using ones that we already have at our disposal in new and different ways and using them even more. Two that really come to mind, obviously TribeLink. I'm frequently known as the TribeLink lady on campus, so I'm going to talk about that. But TribeLink is our engagement platform, and that's where students can go to explore organizations, explore events on campus. There's now also an opportunity to explore service opportunities, both in-person and virtual service. And this year we have the opportunity to shift our org fair, which traditionally was 300 organizations under one roof. Obviously, with the pandemic conditions, putting all of those people and all those organizations in one building wasn't going to be safe. And so we needed to be different and innovative. And fortunately, our platform allowed us to do that. And it actually allowed us to include more organizations in the organization fairs than we've ever had before, because in a physical setting, we had maxed out our capacity. We had as many organizations packed into that event as we could. And this actually opened up more opportunities for organizations to participate. And so we were really excited about that. I think another platform that we have that we've been using for many years that we're starting to see student organizations use a little bit more differently, as well as departments and offices that are providing other types of involvement and engagement opportunities for students is our student happenings. I'm also the person that moderates that. And so I see the heavy volume and the increased volume of announcements and postings there, encouraging students to sign up for auditions or to go and register for certain events or to just learn more about different clubs and organizations or different employment opportunities on campus or internship opportunities across campus. And so really seeing a lot of more increased use of existing platforms at William & Mary to introduce students to different opportunities to get involved. One new opportunity or new platform that we have introduced is Give Pulse, which is moderated by our colleagues in the Office of Community Engagement. And that's really focused on service opportunities and engagement opportunities, because being involved and engaged as a student at William & Mary isn't just about clubs and internships and things on campus, but it's also about giving back to the community, as well as becoming more educated around issues impacting our community.
That's fantastic. I can attest, as someone who receives the student happenings email, that list grows longer every week, and there are incredible opportunities in there that students can really take advantage of. Trici, I'm curious, how has Alma Mater Productions maybe thought differently about the way they attract students to joining or getting involved in that specific organization? As I know it's one that students hear of often and early when they come to William & Mary.
Yeah, Heather, I think it's been, obviously AMP, like other student organizations, has had to learn how to put more opportunities online. And they've been able to do so, I think, and really kept up with some of the traditions that we've always had and switching them to that platform. So, for example, our Charter Day comedian is still happening this year. Pete Davidson, it actually got moved away from Charter Day, unfortunately, because of some scheduling conflicts. So there's still the opportunity to participate in that. But in previous years, that event would only allow for about 600 students to come and join and hear him live and in person. And now we've created so much more access because we can have up to 6,000 people on Zoom. And while that's not in person, it's actually a more personable experience because he can interact individually with William & Mary students and really cater to their interests and sort of the environment that we've created on our campus. And so I think that's been an exciting challenge. If those folks don't know, AMP is a student-run organization. And so they've been the ones really taking the leadership and learning how to do that. They've had a lot of folks still come to their in-person events when we're able to host them. And they're thankful for that, for the opportunity to be able to be there and to be, physically hanging out with people and doing something different. We did a retro 80s night and turned the Sadler Center into a big Pac-Man happening and some other fun things from the 80s. But it's been fun for them. I think they've actually seen an uptick in interest from students wanting to join AMP. They're getting ready to go into the recruitment season as well. So we'll see how that turns out. But just trying to maintain those connections as best we can, because we know that it's not necessarily the physical space that brings us all together. It's that connection that we can have virtually as well.
I think that brings us to our next question very seamlessly, which is, how have student organizations adapted or shifted their activities this year?
I think that's a really great question, because I think there's just so many different ways student organizations have done that. And it's a huge range because, again, nearly 500 student organizations. And, we've got some clubs that really are there to bring students together around interests. Like we have a knitting club and they like to knit together. We have a organization that does hand lettering called Tribe Scribes, and they're still able to do everything they want to. They're having members come pick up supplies, and then they'll get together on Zoom and work on their craft and their project and be able to chat and talk and continue to build community that way. But we also have some organizations that traditionally put on large scale events for the campus. And so they've had to think maybe a little differently, and it's a bigger shift for them than just moving their gatherings to an online Zoom version. And so, a lot of groups have explored possibly bringing in virtual speakers rather than bringing someone to campus physically, and different performers. We've had actually some of our competition groups have really been able to take advantage of increased access to competitions, because now that the travel element has been eliminated because they can't travel somewhere, they're able to compete in competitions that they might not otherwise have been able to. We just had a group that we worked with them to pay for their competition registration for an international competition where previously they wouldn't have been able to travel outside of the country for that. And so it's opening some doors for organizations in different ways, and it's helping them to think differently about how they deliver the experiences that they're used to delivering, and giving them some opportunities to try new and different things. And I think the other piece for student organizations is, rather than focusing on some of these larger scale activities and events, they're starting to think about, how do we build community in smaller groups? How do we help members build one-on-one connections with each other versus everybody just being together in the same space at one event? How do we connect one-on-one? You know, maybe we have coffee together versus just seeing each other at a meeting. And so I think they're figuring out different ways to make those connections, but it's taking them some time to think about that and to think about what the purpose of their organization is and think differently about how they're going to achieve their objectives.
I think that's a wonderful point, and I think many of us on the call and panelists can attest to, we've had to learn how to do things very differently. And I think it's an incredible thought exercise for our students to kind of work through some of these problems that we are also working through in terms of, how do we connect with one another? How do we foster an environment where other students can connect with one another? You know, our upperclassmen who may be more established, how are they fostering an environment for connection? I think it's an incredible, innovative environment that we're in despite the circumstances. Something I do want us to address is, what constraints are in place that may be limiting our ability to create opportunities for engagement? And more importantly, how are students responding to those constraints from your perspective?
Yes, thanks, Heather. So I think that obviously the most obvious thing is that we have certain guidelines. Obviously, each state is approaching it differently, but we've had some pretty strenuous guidelines that limit gatherings here in Virginia. And so that's been something that we always have to take into account when we are determining what our university policies will be. And so, and we have tried to limit that as well in an effort to keep things safe and to reduce exposure. And so we do limit gatherings. Right now, student organizations are limited to just 10 folks in one space together. We allowed for some flexibility so we can get some larger groups together, provided that they have some oversight from sponsored departments and those sort of things. But really want to make sure that everyone's safety is our first priority. And so that's certainly a limitation. And we want to make sure that everyone feels like they can navigate some of those things. And so providing that support for them. We do make sure that we have the social distancing and the masks, and we have sanitization everywhere, trying to make sure that that's all kept up with. And also just trying to, you know, we're all zoomed out. I mean, some of you probably sat all day today on front of the Zoom, just like some of us did. And at the end of the day, you don't really want to be right in front of the screen. We are finding that students do still want some of that. They obviously crave the in-person connection too. And so it's just trying to balance those things and having a little bit of everything, so that, as was just mentioned earlier, that access is really exciting too, because folks who potentially wouldn't have been able to make it can now do it if we can create the right formula of in-person and virtual.
Just to tack on really quickly, something that we had to think about addressing was the constraint of some of our students not necessarily physically being with us on campus. And so the fact that we have a population of students that have chosen to study remotely is something that's gone into consideration with how we've had to sort of shift up some of our programming, and even then thinking about the virtual for them. So their connection to campus and most of their coursework is virtual through Zoom typically. And so asking them to come back on in the evenings to do more Zoom is sometimes a necessity in order for them to maintain a connection to the William and Mary campus community. And that's been really interesting to help navigate, especially on the new student front, where some of our new students may not necessarily join us physically in Williamsburg until this fall, depending on the decisions that they've made for the well-being of themselves and their families. And so that's been a constraint, as well as thinking about how do we reach not just the students who are here with us on campus in the off-campus immediate community, but also those who are still remote and studying away.
That's a fantastic consideration to include there, Lauren. It helps give us a more round picture of how we're making decisions and what things go into how we plan our events and activities for students. My next question is, what are new programs or initiatives your areas have developed as a result of the pandemic? And Trici, we'll start with you.
Sure. This is actually something that I'm very excited about. We have been able to really transform our outdoor space in ways that I just never would have dreamed of. I mean, I'm partial to bistro lights, which is why they're in my background, but we've added those across campus in some key places that really honestly needed some more lighting for safety concerns and all those things. And those will be permanently placed in those locations. And so that's kind of fun. It gives a really cool vibe across campus and makes it feel warm. We've added some Adirondack chairs. We just most recently have installed some fire pits. And so, really trying to take advantage of our outdoor spaces so that not just for programs and not in events, but so that students can sit and just chat on a chair or on a swing and have a conversation outside of and outdoors where we believe the fresh air is a little bit better for them, and then outside of their residence halls. And so that's been really cool to see, and really have enjoyed being able to be a part of that process. We've also embraced the idea of sort of what we call low stakes programming. And so the idea of one afternoon, you might happen upon the terrace and there'll be ice cream being given out and you can grab some ice cream and go walk with a friend. Or we've had a lot of success with grab and go crafts. So we're thinking about how on Mondays people plan for the week. And so we're like, what if we gave somebody a craft or an activity they could do at any time during the week that they felt like they needed some stress relief or just something fun to do. And so we did paint by numbers one week, and then also some embroidery kits another. And students really liked that because they could sit and do it together in that space, or they could take it back to their residence hall, back to another location and do it with a friend if they'd like to do that. So it gives them a lot of flexibility to engage how they'd like to. And then we've also had success with like pop-up bingo and different things like that. And those are things that, we still love and embrace our large events and large campus traditions, but being able to have some of those smaller opportunities really creates that intimate connection that I think that is really important and quintessential to the William & Mary experience. Excuse me.
That is phenomenal. Lauren, did you want to follow up on that one?
I was just going to say, we've actually in our programming, as we're supporting sort of students through this process and trying to help them make connections, is that we've just actually embraced the idea that we're helping students make community connections. And we've named most of our initiatives sort of under that series. And so what's been really interesting is that whenever we send out a newsletter or an event update, you sort of see that you hear the groans and you see the eye rolls of, oh, here's another email coming from the STEP office. But they're coming, like they're reading the emails and they're making conscious decisions about where they want to go and what they want to do. And we're intentionally designing some of those community connections to have them introduce themselves or meet up with others who perhaps they wouldn't have had a chance to meet before, maybe because they don't live on campus, or maybe because they live in a different residence hall. But our office is working quite heavily with what we call distinctive populations. And so students who identify with communities that perhaps aren't necessarily immediately programmed for. So our first generation college students, transfer students, again, remote students. And so thinking about what are ways that we can bring these smaller communities together and have a way for them to be intentionally gathered with some of these low stakes programming ideas that Trici was talking about. And it's a way for them to get some cross-campus exposure, but still feel safe in the fact that we're still following protocols. All of the considerations are still in place, but there's also a high likelihood that they're going to meet someone that perhaps has something in common with them. And it goes back to the common interests that we typically see students joining organizations for.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think the idea of low stakes programming might be something we see continue post-pandemic in terms of allowing students to make connections on a smaller scale rather than just at large scale events. So I love that we were able to share that this evening. So a next question. What can students look forward to as we look ahead this semester? I know February is almost over. I don't know how that happens, how it flies by so quickly every year, but what can students look forward to as we look ahead to the spring?
Warm weather, right? In all seriousness, I think students, at least the students that I think most of us work with, have been talking about how nice it's been these past few days to have this glorious 50, 60 degree weather, because they feel like that they're able to go outside and enjoy the outdoor spaces so much more frequently, and they feel comfortable taking advantage of the resources that are at their disposal, whether it's walking down into Colonial Williamsburg, if it's sitting in one of those Adirondack chairs, or even stretching out on the hammocks, which have not, because of the colder weather, have not necessarily been taken advantage of in recent weeks. But we're also looking forward to the fact that our partners in health and wellness will be increasing their already large slate of activities. Outdoor recreation, outdoor experiential education is part of their bailiwick, and we know that they are just as anxious as we are to start moving and gathering our students outside in these safer spaces. Other things that we know that we can look forward to, we do have some traditions still left for the academic year that even if we have to modify, we'll modify them so that they're COVID appropriate, but we still want to celebrate these accomplishments, not just commencement and graduation, but thinking about the transition from first year to second year, thinking about juniors and getting our juniors ready to sort of think through their senior year. And part of this looking ahead for the semester is also staying in the moment, not forgetting about who's surrounding you, who's in your community right now, and how you are responding and growing as individuals based off of the circumstances around you. So most of y'all on this call probably are familiar with the spring break days that have been slated across the semester. Trici is spearheading this group of us across campus to help us think intentionally about these spring break days, not to overprogram, but to help us create some opportunities for students who maybe want to do something a little bit different on those days. And so we've picked up on the health and wellness theme of Wellness Your Way, and we're encouraging students to exercise wellness their way on these spring break days. And so every day has a theme focused on one of the 8 dimensions of wellness, and various offices and student organizations across campus are thinking intentionally about how they might want to get involved in these days and their themes. Trici, are there things that families should know about these Wellness Your Way days that are coming up?
Yeah, I think just to know that obviously we all know that the spring break days are happening, and that it isn't at all by any means that they are required to participate in those things. It is just a way for us to try to keep them, to give, like as you mentioned, those folks that would like something to do, an opportunity to do something. For example, it's that low stakes programming. The first one that we're programming for is on Friday and next Friday, and the idea is come grab some free coffee, find a friend, and have a conversation. And so just sort of centering around this idea of, again, what can you do if you want to stay in your residence hall and watch a movie all day, or if you want to take an extra nap, whatever you want to do, that's your prerogative. But also, here are some things that you can do that will bring you out and hopefully get you connected across campus as well.
And families can look forward to getting some more information about Wellness Your Way days in our upcoming parent and family newsletter, which is scheduled to go out next Tuesday. So keep an eye out for that. My last question before we get to some live questions, and I'll just ask that each of our panelists chime in on this one. How can families support their student in finding connection at William & Mary?
Nobody else unmuted, so I'm jumping in. I think helping your student find connection is to start asking them questions about what they're looking for and how they're currently going about this exploration process. We've talked about TribeLink. Jen's mentioned student happenings. And there are numerous offices across campus that have listservs, and of course, social media. Instagram is huge, especially with event sharing. And so in some cases, I know that some students feel overwhelmed. There's a lot of information coming at them. They're seeing a lot of events, but sometimes it's figuring out what they want to go to. And that FOMO, even during this pandemic, the idea that there's the fear of missing out, that they might miss out on that one really cool thing, is still very real. So I would start with asking them some exploratory questions about what they're interested in and how they've been looking at getting information and where they've been finding information. The nice thing for y'all to know is that student happenings automatically get sent to every William & Mary student's email address. And so that's not something they have to subscribe for. They're automatically subscribed for the STEP newsletters. And if other offices are of interest to them and they want to know how to get onto the OCE, the Office of Community Engagement's newsletter, and things of that nature, they're more than welcome to reach out to STEP, or they can actually find access information about those offices through TribeLink, tribelink.wm.edu. The other thing is that you might have to remind your student that they may need to outreach themselves, and that making friends in some ways hasn't changed one bit. Sometimes all you need to do is introduce yourself to the person standing next to you as you're waiting to get grab and go dinner from the caf. Or it's chatting with some folks in your Zoom class to see if they want to start a study group. You might not necessarily be able to whisper down the table and start that study group in person, but you can still use the chat function and accomplish a very similar outcome. The other thing is to remind your student that there are more semesters ahead of them. And it is really quite normal for students not necessarily to feel like that they've found that one thing that floats their boat at the end of the first year. I don't know too many students who by the end of their first year or even their second year felt like they had everything figured out. And so it really is normal for students, especially in these first few semesters, to be navigating and figuring out these processes. And this is where their resident assistants and their orientation aides can be a really strong support process. And I would encourage you to encourage your student to reach out to those student leaders and ask for assistance if they're having trouble connecting.
I would emphasize Lauren's point about making friends. And I think going one step further and maybe finding a buddy that your student wants to go do things with, because sometimes it can be scary to go to an event or go somewhere on campus to find these opportunities to get involved in these different things that are going on. And so just find a friend and invite them to go with you. Or, some of the things that aren't event-based, like invite a friend, like cider walks are great in the fall, and you can still go get a nice beverage and walk through CW and enjoy that. There's still ice skating for the next few days that's available to students. And so it's really just maybe making that invite and making that first gesture of including someone else. And then that will come back and it will be reciprocated. And so I think it is that putting yourself out there is something that I think is hard for our students in general. It's hard for me, and I'm a grown-up allegedly. And so just being able to take that first step is going to be important, and all the encouragement that you can give to your student, I think will mean a lot. And I would also say, also peruse TribeLink. Most of the events are actually visible to the general public. So you can log on to TribeLink. I think I'm going to have to give Lauren the title of TribeLink lady after tonight. But you can go to TribeLink and you can look and see what's going on. You can explore the different organizations. If you know your child or your student's interests, and ask them, like, did you know that there's a club about X? have you reached out to them? All of their contact information is on this page. And so I think it's also being aware of the resources and helping to redirect your student to those resources.
And I think also and particularly this applies more to upperclassmen and students who might already be involved in organizations and are trying to figure out ways to help their organization or friend group be successful. I think that ask questions. I mean, I think that we're in a time where we're being very creative. And so if they see something that they would like to see have happen on campus, to ask those questions. And, it's not going to hurt to say, I know that we technically can't have this, but have we ever thought about putting up a tent in the middle of a field and making it a classroom? I mean, I think we've had like some really unique opportunities, and that creativity is really fresh and new. And I think, particularly as administrators, we're really interested in hearing what they want, what they could see as possibilities. And so to ask those questions, to email, we're SUE events is our email, and we could always just, bounce around ideas for ways that they could connect with students outside of their own circles, and plan events that might be different and unique that nobody can even think of right now we haven't even dreamed of it yet. So I think just ask those questions and don't be afraid to ask, because you can't get an answer if you don't ask.
I think that is all really wonderful advice. So hopefully our families can take some of that advice if their student is asking them those questions or sharing that they're looking for connection at William and Mary. And thank you all for answering all of those questions. Hopefully it provides some insight into, how we're navigating some really tough circumstances and understanding that students are facing some really real challenges in connecting with one another, but that we're striving to do our best to provide those opportunities for connection here at William and Mary and for our students who may be studying remotely. So we have just a couple minutes for some live questions, and quite a few have come in. So I've compiled just a really short list of the ones that I want to tackle. First, we talked about a lot of things in terms of websites and newsletters and just where to find things. And one family member asks us, for those students who are struggling with motivation to seek on-campus connection outside of their room during this time, is there a consolidated list of activities or opportunities that a parent can view in order to help encourage their child attend? And I think now is a great opportunity for us to talk about things that we've mentioned earlier. And I know one we haven't talked about is 6 Feet of Fun. So if anyone wants to jump in and share what that is, and maybe I can work on grabbing some links for families who are on the call with us.
I can talk about 6 Feet of Fun. So 6 Feet of Fun is an initiative that is being sponsored by our student government, which we call Student Assembly. And it's a weekly curated list of different events and opportunities across campus that students can participate in. So we have a section that's about events, virtual and some on-campus in-person events. We also have a section about joining opportunities or things that we think students might want to check out. And then we have another section, again, our health and wellness area on campus is just doing a lot of really great things. And so we have a section specifically highlighting those opportunities. So different intramurals, they might not be competing in actual, basketball, but they are holding tournaments and skills competitions and things. So students can still be physically involved and engaged and do those activities. So it's those 3 basic areas. So that website is updated on a weekly basis with the upcoming week's opportunities, and a newsletter also goes out. So if a student missed the newsletter, they can go see the website as well. And the events that are provided on that list are pulled from both TribeLink and William and Mary events. So we kind of try to consolidate a lot of the opportunities into 6 Feet of Fun.
Fantastic. So I know we've mentioned 6 Feet of Fun. We've mentioned TribeLink. I also put events.wm.edu down because families might see some events. We have so many virtual events right now that families might even see some that they want to hop on and join in the conversation. And also, just for our parents and families on the call, Parent and Family Programs Facebook every Monday is doing a post on Facebook, which highlights some of the key events that are happening that week. So if you're wondering, what's happening at William and Mary this week, we try to provide you an overview of some of those big items that we know that students are talking about, like Pete Davidson will definitely be on our list when that comes around. And we always try to link to events.wm.edu so you can explore those. So that's a great place to go if you're wondering what is happening on campus right now and you want a link as a family member. I highly encourage you to like Parent and Family Programs on Facebook. So my next question is, we've kind of touched on how student organizations need to be a bit more creative in terms of their operations. Are we giving students or student organizations any guidance on how to do COVID-19 regulations and things like that safely?
I'll jump in. This is really Jen's area of expertise, but we partner with them for the events that students will be executing on campus. And so we have asked each student organization to think about what their COVID-19 plan is. And so they do, this happened last semester, but they submitted, this is how we'll approach our events, this is how we'll approach our meetings, this is how we'll keep everyone safe. And then if they do, and that's just a general, this is what we're thinking about. And then they do plan an event in one of the spaces that student unions and engagement manages, they have to answer a series of questions that tells us how they will enforce the protocols, how they will, that we require that they track attendance so that through TribeLink, so that if we had to do any contract tracing, we'd have some of that information. And again, that's where we also say to them, if you think this is something you can't do, ask the question and let's see if we can work through some creative ways to have that event that you really think is important to have in person. And so we do, there are a lot more rules this year, but students have been very understanding and accommodating, knowing that this is really just for everyone's best interest.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to address our last question. We had a question come in. Will restrictions on campus be relaxed on March 1 following the governor's new COVID guidance? So if any out-of-state families are on the call who maybe don't follow Virginia COVID restrictions closely, our governor did release some new restrictions, which aren't new restrictions. They're rolling back some restrictions, essentially giving us a little bit more freedom, not a ton, but a little bit more. And so, we don't yet know how those updates are going to impact us on campus as those were released yesterday, but we will share more information with students and families if any changes were to be made to our COVID-19 protocols and policies. So we will share that information as it becomes available. I just want to say a big thank you to Trici, Lauren, and Jennifer for joining us this evening. This was a fantastic conversation. Very grateful for all of the work that you're doing to help our students find their people here at William & Mary and do so safely. And so I just want to give a big thank you to you all and thank you to our families for joining us this evening. This session was recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel shortly. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening.